Coming up next on Tech News Today, Skype is becoming Snapchatified. Chrome is prepping for its own flavor of ad blocking. Apple's App Store hits a $70 billion milestone. How Trump's decision to back out of the Paris Climate Agreement might affect the technology industry. And the Nintendo Switch goes skydiving. All that and more coming up next on Tech News Today.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Tech News Today is provided by CashFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Tech News Today, episode number 1780, recorded Thursday, June 1st, 2017. This episode of Tech News Today is brought to you by Oars Alps, powerful skincare made for a guy's active lifestyle. Join thousands of men using Oars Alps today. Go to oursandalps.com/twit to receive 15% off your first order. Hello and welcome to Tech News Today. This is the show where we talk about all the tech news stories that are at the top of our list. Not the ones that are buried deep at the bottom. Sometimes those end up at the very end of the show.
Just the cream of the crop.
The cream of the crop. We skim it off the top and we give you what you need to know. I'm Jason Howell.
And I'm Nathan Olivares-Giles.
Yeah.
Well, let's get right into it. First, Instagram did it. Then Facebook. Then WhatsApp. Now Skype is doing it too. Ripping off Snapchat. That's right, Skype, thanks to a total redesign, looks a lot like Snapchat now, and a little bit like Apple's iMessage too. There are 4 major parts to the new app. There's Find, which has many apps that let you do stuff like buy a ticket to a concert or a movie. There's Chat, which lets you send text messages with friends as well as photos and GIFs. There's Capture, which lets you share photos and videos with specific friends, and what you share disappears after a 24-hour period. And then there's Highlights, where you can upload the same sort of photos and videos in Capture to a space where all your friends in Skype can see them. And again, those disappear after about 24 hours. You can add text, stickers, finger drawings to all the media you share in Capture and Highlights too. Now you can still place voice calls in the new Skype. You can still talk with those lackluster chat bots. So all the old functionality is carried over, but now you can do things like respond to photos and videos and text with emojis as you would do in iMessage. So it's a kind of a mishmash of a few different super popular messaging apps. What do you think, Jason? Is this going to get you to use Skype every day with your besties?
No, I mean, that's the thing. Like, I have a very specific use case for Skype. I use it to call a very select, like even on one hand, I could count the amount of people that I ever use Skype with.
Yeah.
Outside of here at work, we use Skype all the time for things here.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think of Skype in that same way that I think of some of these other social networks.
It's kind of an enterprise tool, right? I've always thought of Skype as an enterprise tool. And it's like, if you have that one friend who's super into Hangouts and that one friend who's into FaceTime, you want to use something and not everybody can agree. People, oftentimes we default to Skype, I feel like, because that's the one app. Well, it's like everybody has it. Everybody has an account, even if you haven't used it in 6 months or something.
Yeah. I mean, there's all these features that are jumping between social networks. And I guess this isn't the first time that we've seen a messaging platform get social media-ized, affected by social. Like Facebook Messenger has done a lot of this too, where they have the bots in there now. They have their own set of stories. I don't know how used they are, how much people are actually using them. Skype, I feel less like it's less of a platform for that to make sense in. But I guess when you compare Skype to Facebook Messenger, a lot of it's similar. So if one could do it, why not the other? I just don't know if maybe I use Skype differently than most people do. Like it's really a utility for me. It's not a network that I spend a lot of time on.
There's this interesting thing happening where Skype is like that go-to business chat app. Yeah. And then Hangouts was kind of that go-to chat app with your friends because it was built in Gmail, and it seems like everybody has a Gmail account and hangs out there during their workday or whatever. And Hangouts wants to become the enterprise app, and Skype wants to become the cool social app that you use with your friends.
So true.
And in the process, Hangouts isn't fun to use anymore. Yeah. And I just wonder if Skype is going to alienate all the business users in the process. I just wish Google and Microsoft would just trade hey, you take Skype, we'll take Hangouts, and we'll just leave it all alone. Because they're ruining a couple, well, they could potentially ruin. Yeah. We'll see where it goes. Yeah. But they could potentially ruin 2 great apps here because they're chasing Snapchat, which I don't know. Maybe it'll still be popular in 5 years, but maybe it won't.
Which is actually kind of interesting when you think about it, because Snapchat, as far as total number of users, 160 million users on Snapchat. Skype has 300 million users.
Yeah.
Instagram has 400 million users. Other networks have way more than that. Snapchat really isn't at the top of the list when it comes to these things. However, everybody, Instagram in particular, has made a really good kind of revitalization around their business by copying Snapchat's features.
Yep.
And so, I guess everybody else, including Microsoft, is like, well, if it worked for them, it could work for us. It almost feels like Microsoft in some way has been like, all right, the stories thing, everybody's doing the stories thing. We need to do it too. What's the thing that we could do that in? Skype, I guess. That's our property that we would do this in, right? Okay, let's try it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it necessarily fits. For me, it doesn't fit anyway.
It's Microsoft is cooler than it's been in a really long time.
Yeah,
probably
in many ways.
Yeah, because, it's like they're really doing something that could be special with HoloLens.
Yeah.
The Surface Books and the Surface Pros and all, beautiful hardware. Maybe not the most popular, but really nice looking stuff, high quality stuff. Xbox, of course, continues to be a really exciting business, even though it's not at the top of console sales. It's just like, I feel like Microsoft is coolest when it's not trying to be other companies.
Something else.
Yeah. And it goes through these little phases every once in a while where it just tries to, jump on whatever's popular. And I don't know if it'll work out for them, but fascinating nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. Google's Chrome browser is expected to receive new functionality that will enable it to detect and then block what it determines to be bad ads. We've heard about that before. And Google is now reaching out to publishers to forewarn them of this change. Google's rolling out a tool for publishers called ad experience reports, there we go, that will educate publishers about their own bad ads ahead of the switch in order to give them time to address these issues prior to the feature's launch. Google still hasn't acknowledged these plans publicly, but sources say the feature should begin to appear as early next year. And, bad ads, just as an idea of what those could be in here, pop-ups, autoplay ads, flashing image ads, and I guess it'll be built around a threshold. So if a site has a certain level of these bad ads, then the tool would determine, okay, we're blocking ads here until the publisher corrects those ads and makes them right.
Yeah, and there's no word yet on what that threshold would be, but of course that's a question we'd all like to know. It's like if you have pop-ups on one page, and there are a lot of bad ads out there. If you look at, I hate to say it, but like most local news websites and things like that are filled with like those pop-up or kind of roll-down ads.
I hate the roll-down ads.
Yeah, those, right?
Or the ones where, are those the ones where you're scrolling and then suddenly
suddenly this page drops,
creeps up from the bottom and you have to scroll it out. Oh,
and a lot of great sites from a journalistic side that I read and do enjoy have the auto roll video ads, which just drive me nuts. The autoplay ads. So this stuff is prevalent. So what is a bad ad to Google? In Chrome, which is the most popular web browser out there, is not necessarily a bad ad to a publisher that on its own website has decided every single video, we're going to have a video on every page and it's going to autoplay on every page. And I'm not going to call anybody out, but you know who you are out there, publishers. And a lot of our audience, you probably know some of those websites.
Yes.
But it's like, some of these websites, getting rid of that could be hugely detrimental to their whole business plan, their revenue stream.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to see some of these bad. I gotta say, I agree with Google. A lot of these ads are really annoying, but it's almost like they're strong arming and making that decision as to what bad is.
Absolutely.
That can be kind of dangerous territory.
Well, especially because they are in the ad business.
Yeah.
And so they're in the ad business determining when you're using their browser. Mind you, it is their browser. Chrome is the most popular browser at the moment, 44.5% according to Digital Analytics Program of all web browsers online. And so, they're in the ad business. They're determining what makes bad ads. And are they making that determination fairly is the big question.
Yeah.
And, because they could potentially stand to gain monetarily from just deciding, we don't like these ads. At the same time, we all know we've experienced bad ads before.
Oh, yeah.
And it would be great to not have those in abundance the way it has been in certain experiences. So I'm all for cleaning it up. I mean, is Google the right company to make that determination?
I'm not sure if Google is the right company to make that determination, but they are the company that has the most influence and power to actually make that stick.
They've got leverage,
right? They have the leverage. So, you know, do they have the right? Maybe not.
Yeah.
But they're in that position of power, and this is something they can do. And like you said, this is something that could potentially benefit them since they sell ads, and ideally they would be blocking other ads. And if they're not selling those types of ads, they might not be blocking their own stuff that they're selling. So, you know, who knows where it's gonna play out. I hope that they give publishers enough of a lead period to actually change things if they are going to correspond with this.
And that's kind of what it sounds like they're doing right now. They're giving a heads up saying you can use our tool right now to check your site and see if the ads on your site would be blocked by our system, and if it will. If it comes back as positive, it would be blocked. You can make those changes, and they give you kind of the guidance, you know, based on what they find on your site as far as how you can change that to kind of fix the problem. And by the way, this would be activated by default, so on by default. This is not like something that you have to turn on as a user. This is I updated Chrome, and now it does this ad blocking by default. I can turn it off if I like.
Wow.
So
yeah. Well, Google didn't mention any new stats on how much it's paid out to developers via its Google Play storefront at its recent I/O developer conference. Facebook and Amazon, both of which court developers and in Amazon's case actually run an app store, haven't made any similar such mentions recently either. But ahead of its worldwide developer conference, which kicks off next week, Apple said today that it's paid out more than $70 billion to developers who have uploaded apps to its iOS App Store, which opened up in 2008. Remember, that's what Apple has paid out after taking its 30% cut of revenue for App Store transactions. Apple said that in the last 12 months alone, downloads have grown over 70%. Active paid subscriptions on the App Store are also up 58% year over year. Gaming and entertainment are the top grossing app categories, and lifestyle, health, and fitness apps have experienced over 70% growth in the past year. No surprise, the photo and video category grew nearly 90% last year. So it seems like Apple is, you know, people are buying apps. It seems like Apple on iOS devices, this is where people buy and consume and spend on apps. And even though there are more Android devices out there,
right,
the quiet on these sorts of stats, which you expect to come out during developer conferences, is interesting.
Yeah, interesting that they're doing some of these announcements, and we'll have another one here in a few stories ahead of the event. But yeah, I mean, $70 billion, obviously that's a huge number. Don't get me wrong, but I'm very curious to know like the percentage breakdown of like the top earners that make up that amount of money. And I have to imagine that the majority of that is eaten up by a very small number of developers who have either figured out a really great formula, have a ton of really successful apps or whatever. You know, and I'm sure that there are a lot of developers that really make hardly, if not next to none, you know, comparatively.
Yeah, what that disparity is, if it is there, would be really fascinating to know. One of the things that Apple touted in its announcement of this is that there are more than 155 countries represented in the App Store as far as like where developers are from. So it seems like it's a pretty, you know, diverse App Store globally.
Right.
But of course, the sorts of things that are available in one country aren't necessarily available elsewhere. I wouldn't mind seeing more of a geographic breakdown too. Is most is happening in the U.S. or other places. Of course, China is a major growth area for a lot of apps, but the app behaviors in China are much different, and most people in China have Android phones.
And is the iOS store that's in China? Like they have a deal? Because I know Google's had a hard time breaking into China because there's certain requirements that China has on Google around their Play Store that they would have to make in order to actually break into that.
And that's part of why in China, and not so much here, apps like WeChat and Tencent and these sorts of things all across Asia, messaging apps that can basically serve as their own app stores and own app platforms where you can use apps inside of apps. There's layers here. That
goes deep.
Yeah, that method is taken off because it is so tough to get stuff out there with content restrictions and censorship and all that.
Yeah, and 70% increase in the past year is kind of crazy, especially when you consider there's been a lot of talk in the last couple of years as far as like moving beyond apps and how nobody's installing apps anymore, and everybody uses the same 5 apps on their phone all the time, and blah blah blah. That number would would counter that argument. I would say.
It seems like it would counter that, and also there's a lot of talk about the fact that smartphones, it's a mature market. Yeah. It's basically just Apple and Samsung selling all the phones or whatever. And is there any more innovation to be had in phones?
Right.
And maybe AR is the next thing, maybe VR is the next thing, maybe it's AI or whatever. But this does seem to show some sort of appetite for apps that is still there, right? Even if the pace of hardware sales on mobile phones and tablets is slowing, right? Which is what the numbers have shown. But at the same time, we don't exactly know, like, is this broken down with people who are buying apps for the first time? Are they like giving up on them after a while? Is this like in-app content? The free-to-play thing is pretty popular.
That's very popular, subscription-based content.
And that was actually an area that did interest me quite a bit, because that would hopefully show some positive signs for publishers and for media companies, and for companies that have frankly gotten their butts kicked by this mobile technology revolution, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, absolutely. Motorola announced the Moto Z2 Play handset, a $499 sequel to the Moto Mod-capable Moto Z Play from late last year. Smartphone has a 5.5-inch Super AMOLED 1080p display, Qualcomm Snapdragon 626 processor, 3 to 4 gigs of RAM, depending on the region that you buy it, a 12-megapixel rear-facing camera, and Android Nougat on board out of the box. However, the battery is trimmed down from the previous model to 3,000 milliamp hours, which makes the device at least a bit slimmer, so there's that. And along with the new mid-ranger that you're seeing here, Motorola unveiled a few new Moto Mod options for its modular-friendly devices, which is most of its catalog at this point right now. And I don't know, this is just, I find the phone's an interesting release, and I'm curious to see it. I'm maybe a little more curious to see how Motorola does with the expansion of its kind of Moto Mod catalog. Because this whole modular phone thing, I don't know, as a trend, it seemed like it was going to be the next thing, and then only a few, a handful of smartphone makers have actually done it. Now we hear Andy Rubin's Essential is kind of jumping on that bandwagon. So I'm very curious to see kind of the hardware support of this whole modular approach to smartphones.
Yeah, it's fascinating. LG had some little accessories you could snap onto previous phones. They've pretty much given up on that. And really the only ones who are kind of betting their mobile phone business on these modular components, and hopefully that will keep you buying their phone year after year after year or whatever, at least that's their hope, is really Motorola and now Essential. It seems like they use a similar pogo pin style technology, but I would like to know whether or not Motorola and Essential's components would be swappable across those two companies, because it's a similar technology, and as we know, Google used to own Motorola, and that's when a lot of that idea of these kind of pogo pin dependent swappable components was really popular. Back at that time, Andy Rubin was still at Google as well, so I'm sure things have diverted since then. But that's just a question that pops up in my mind. At the same time, this phone really does kind of look like more of the same from Motorola, and it's not exactly like the Moto Z Play, the first generation, lit up the world last year. People weren't scrambling to buy it, so I'm still not sold on the possibility that people really want modular phones.
Yeah, I'm guessing that the modules don't interswap only because, and I think actually I'm guessing it's probably a firm no. In the Motorola kind of implementation of Moto Mods, there's more than just power transfer. It's also data transfer through the pins.
And there's more pins. There's like 4 pins versus 2 pins.
There's way more
probably
pins.
Spaced differently.
And I think on the Essential phone, it's like 2 or 4 pins, and it's merely to provide power, and then all the data transfer is wireless.
So what we need is a module dongle.
We need a specification.
And then an adapter.
Oh God, no.
Oh, actually,
no, we don't need that.
This reminds me. I think it was OtterBox that actually came out with a series of cases that had some little swappable components as well. So there are a few different people who are playing with this idea.
That's right. But if you end up with some of Motorola's devices that can do the Moto mods, JBL Sound Boost 2, which is like an improved kind of little speaker attachment that you can put on there for $79.99.
Yeah, almost as good as like a Bluetooth speaker. I tested that out last year, and it was actually surprisingly good.
Yeah, I think for the most part it sounds about the same. It's just a little bit more compact design.
Yep.
Moto Turbo Power Pack with a 3290 milliamp hour battery that can charge the phone with fast charge. Moto style shell with wireless charging, so it gives it Qi and PMA wireless charging. And then there was a prototype, a Moto gamepad for $79.99. It's no release date yet, but it has 2 analog sticks. It's down at the very bottom of this article, Brian. But I know, Nate, you'd probably appreciate this as a gamer.
Yeah.
And it's a gamepad, 2 analog sticks, a digital controller.
It reminds me a lot of the
front,
Nintendo Switch.
Actually. Yeah, I know, right? It looks very switchable.
Yeah.
But I mean, and that's something like there was a phone a long time ago. It was the Sony Xperia Play.
Yeah, where you can slide up
controller.
Yeah.
And I thought this was going to be more of a trend in smartphones for gamers, smartphone users who are gamers.
Yeah. Do you remember the Nokia N-Gage? I don't know if Brian can find a picture of that. That thing was a monster. There were just like buttons everywhere. But that was one of the earliest attempts at making a phone that was also a gaming device.
2005.
So,
really early.
Yeah. So the idea that your phone would eventually become, look at that thing. That's the Nokia N-Gage. That is a phone that was built for gamers. And I mean, awesome. This has been a long-running idea. Will the phone eventually replace your console? Will that be the place where you do all your gaming? And you know, there are a lot of really great mobile games out there. A lot of games that I just absolutely love, but all of which are built around the touchscreen and don't really require a controller.
Yeah.
Now, if you have that, sometimes it can be nice.
Makes it better.
Sometimes it makes it better, like Street Fighter on your phone or something like that. Final Fantasy is a little bit better on phones with a controller, I think. But most games aren't really built around that. So nonetheless, it's exciting to see this. But the first thing I think of is, well, Nintendo Switch, and then secondly, it's like, oh yeah, the Nokia N-Gage.
I had not even seen the N-Gage. That is craziness. I love it.
Yeah. Well, Apple's Swift Playgrounds is an easy way for anyone, kids or adults, to learn how to build iOS apps on an iOS device using the Swift programming language. Now, Swift Playgrounds will be able to control robots, drones, and tech-equipped toys from big names like Lego, Sphero, and Parrot, all of whom sell products in Apple stores. Other compatible toy makers include UbiTech, Wonder Workshop, and Skoog. Lego has already built around 10 hours worth of lessons for Swift Playgrounds that'll work with some of its Mindstorms toys. So this also, to your point earlier, Jason, seems like the sort of announcement that Apple would make at its Worldwide Developers Conference. I'm pretty interested in the fact that they made this one a little bit earlier, but this really seems like kind of a no-brainer move, since kids like to play with iPads. They're probably, arguably some of the most passionate users of tablets these days, and they love apps, and they're also playing with these toys. So, like, why not make this extension, right?
Yeah, especially something like Mindstorm that really requires them to just approach building from a technology perspective, kind of integrating this. Lego actually designed 10 hours of lessons for the Playground app to get kids started with Swift for Mindstorms. Sphero has its SPRK Plus orb.
Yeah, and
Spark.
Yes, it was. Yeah, Spark. And they've actually had that for a couple of years, and you would do the coding in their own app. And now they have that coding available inside of Playground. So this is kind of an expansion of what they've already been doing. But Sphero should get some credit. They were really at the forefront of letting you do some coding on whatever device it is that you have to control the toy that you're playing with.
Yeah, and that's kind of what's cool about this announcement, is that it's not based around hardware that you then have to go out and buy. You might already have this hardware. And if you do, then hey, what do you know? Now you can learn Swift, connect it with your iPad, and start programming for it. Also, one thing that they pointed out as a possibility because of this is real world Pong, where you use your feet as the paddles and a Spark orb as the ball.
I feel like that would be a blast.
For some reason, real world Pong sounds awesome to me.
I feel like that would be a blast. If you see the Sphero ball, it's just this ball, and there's so much stuff you can do with it. And really, over the years, they've supported it with great app updates, all these sorts of coding expansions. But yeah, I mean, it's maybe a little silly to be playing with your feet, but why not?
Why not? Yeah, use your hands.
Yeah, but I do wonder though if these are the announcements that Apple's making before WWDC, what because this is the sort of stuff that you normally see in those keynotes. What are they clearing the way for, right?
Yeah.
And so, in some way, I wonder if it puts more pressure to really knock it out the park with their WWDC keynote, because this is the sort of stuff you think would fill it up, and that could take some stage time for sure.
Yeah, and if they're clearing out some of the actual developer-y, news from the stage, maybe that's how they're making room for the non-developer-y news, which is what everyone's expecting, some hardware announcements for the first time in the last few years. You know, possibly the Series speaker showing off, MacBook Pro refreshes. So maybe this is how they clear room for that. Are developers happy with that? Are they happy sacrificing that stage time for hardware versus more developer stuff? I don't know. But I guess regardless, the information gets out there as we've seen today.
Yep.
So, quick reminder that you can comment on anything that we discuss at any time. Just email us, tnt@twit.tv. We might include it on the show. And, of course, subscribe to Tech News Today by going to our show page. That's twit.tv/TNT. Coming up, what the Trump administration's decision to abandon the Paris Climate Agreement means for technology in the tech space. But first, let's take a minute to thank Oars Alps. They're the sponsor of this episode. And Oars Alps, it's all about your skin. I've got a box of Oars Alps right here. GQ calls Oars Alps a new essential for your daily routine. It's powerful skincare made for a guy's dehydrated skin and active lifestyle. If you're super active, your skin needs to be protected, and that's what Oars Alps is all about. You got your power cleansing face stick right here. With activated charcoal. It exfoliates your skin. It pulls out all the impurities. You just roll that off, apply it on your face, and then splash it off with some water. It's really easy to use and super compact. You've also got, let's see here, Active Armor deodorant, of course, because we all need a little bit of deodorant. Also a 2-in-1 hydrating and anti-aging face and eye cream. It's non-greasy, fast-absorbing, and no-nonsense deodorant that I showed you as well. Everything's super portable, TSA approved. It's made with powerful and natural ingredients that offer intense hydration. Products last up to 3 months. Oars Alps products were developed by two women, Laura and Mia, for their husbands. Made them for their husbands. They partnered with the leading chemists and created Oars Alps to protect their husband's skin from extreme outdoor conditions that often resulted in dry, cracked skin because, I mean, I can speak for myself. Sometimes guys just aren't that good at taking care of their skin. So sometimes somebody else has to do it for you. So we thank Laura and Mia for doing that. They set out to solve a common problem. Spilled product in gym bags is another problem that they solved. So they created the first solid face wash for men. You just throw it in your bag and you go. Products are perfect to take on the go wherever your next adventure happens to be. Their name, of course, as you can imagine, inspired by awesome outdoor activities. Oars as in rowing, Alps as in skiing. So maybe you do those things, and then this has a home on your shelf because you know exactly why you need it. Your skincare should keep up with your on-the-go lifestyle. And, oh, by the way, it's a really great Father's Day gift or recent grad gift, as many grads are graduating this week. So maybe get them a gift of Oars Alps. Oars Alps is offering the Twit audience a fresh start to your day. Join the thousands of guys using Oars Alps. Visit oursandalps.com/twit to receive 15% off your first order. That's Oars and Alps, OARSANDALPS.com/twit. And we thank Oars and Alps for their support. All right, President Trump made the announcement a few hours ago that the United States would be withdrawing from the Paris Climate Accord, and the decision motivated many of tech's biggest players to become very vocal about it, both before and after. Joining us to talk about this decision and its effects on tech in general is Roberto Baldwin from Engadget. How's it going, Roberto?
It's going all right. So far, the rising seas haven't engulfed me, so at least we have a few years.
Yeah, that's a plus, I'd say, in my book. First, I guess we should start with the basics here. For those who don't know, give us a little bit of a background on what the Paris Climate Agreement actually is before we get to kind of the tech industry response to it.
Sure. So in December 2015, 195 countries came together and decided to figure out a way to both halt our current sort of destruction of the planet, or just climate change, and try to figure out a way to bring it back. Now, the idea that we can get 195 countries on board for anything is insane, and So it's crazy. Everyone is on this except for Syria, Nigeria, or I'm sorry, not Nigeria, Nicaragua, Syria, Nicaragua, and now us. It's really more of a promise. It's a promise that everyone's making. We're going to promise to reduce carbon emissions. And it also helps with a lot of the emerging countries that can't afford to switch over to solar. They can't afford to switch over to natural gas. They can't afford to switch over to wind. So the superpowers, United States, Germany, Italy, Paris, all the people with a lot of, all these nations with a ton of money, they were going to help sort of pay to get these people up to speed. And now the United States is pulled out of it, and it's disappointing because it kind of flies in the face of science.
Yeah. Now, leading up to today's announcement, technology companies, bigwigs, people, heading these companies were getting involved with kind of warning against the decision. They have some skin in the game, aside from the fact that, we all live on the same planet. Elon Musk actually announced after the fact that he's leaving his advisory role to the administration over this decision, which, I mean, I read that, I'm like, okay, well, good for him. I wonder why this was the final straw. But I don't know, how could this decision actually affect the business of a company like Tesla or a company like Apple or Facebook? They've all made comments on this. Well,
the environment it's everything, really. Yeah. You have to be able to build upon land. As climate change progresses, we're going to have less land to build on. We're going to have these sort of it changes the weather patterns. I mean, just the idea that we're part of an ecosystem, even though these are companies, they're still part of the same ecosystem the rest of us are on. And so, dealing with that ecosystem and dealing with other countries, and, when you are you're dealing internationally, it matters what people think of you. I mean, even for the tech companies, it matters. Like, well, you're part of the United States, but it's also political. This also matters to the United States. So things the United States might want that they're trying to talk other countries into, those countries might be like, no, you didn't sign the Paris Accord, and so we don't want to deal with you for this either. So that influences trade. It influences commerce. It influences everything. So it is really a global. We're part of a big giant blue ball spinning through space, and at some point, we all have to work together for something, and this seemed like the thing that was going to bring everyone together. And to pull ourselves out of it because of some sort of weird idea that it's bad for trade, it's bad for the economy is really short-sighted, because it's actually bad for trade and the economy in the long term.
And so there were reports that Tim Cook actually personally called Trump and asked him not to do this. Intel and others were making even advertisements kind of commenting on this. Nike and Disney have even spoken on this. It looks like Bob Iger just left an advisory role as well. Do you expect, Robbie, that tech CEOs and CEOs in general and companies in general will be commenting on this further, or what? Because it sounds like Trump actually wants to try to renegotiate some sort of re-entry back into the Paris deal, he said today, or maybe even try and come up with something new seemingly on his own. But again, like you said, more than 100 countries have already bought into this idea. So what influence could these executives have now?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And that's the thing, is that these people have been on this advisory board, and Elon Musk especially has sort of stayed on the advisory board because he wanted to be that, I guess, that sort of voice of reason when it came to the environment. And I understand that argument that you want to be the person in the room that says, no, climate change is real. We actually have science that backs that, as opposed to this sort of conspiracy theorist idea that, oh no, it's not real. Weather patterns change all the time, and yeah, they change all the time, but not at the alarming rate that they are now. And so you have you had Musk on the team, you have all these other people. And then you finally have to realize that he's not going to listen to you. The administration is not going to listen to your science merit-based argument. And if it's not, then what's the point of being there? And I think a lot of tech CEOs, GE, the CEO of GE also spoke out, like you said, Bob Iger. I mean, you have a lot of companies that are saying this is a bad deal. We should have stayed in there. And, the Paris Accord isn't perfect. I mean, nothing's perfect, but 194 countries working together for one goal is substantial and impressive. And to pull out of it for short-term, political reasons is insane.
It's going to take years, though, to actually unwind all this, correct? I mean, this is technically a move that should outlast his administration, if it goes the full 4 or 8 years, to actually unwind, right? This is kind of complicated stuff, correct?
Yeah, so it'll take 4 years for the United States to sort of be pulled out, to fully pull itself out of the Paris Agreement, and it's actually the day after the next election. So, expect, in 2 years when people start gearing up for the election, this is going to be something people are going to talk about. You expect the Democrats are going to be talking about it a lot. And, Republicans, maybe, if they decide to go in another way, Trump's losing a lot of support in his own party, so they might find someone else to replace him. And for him, I mean, he's going to use it as a talking point. I pulled the United States out of this sort of globalist idea. And he's very nationalist. He wants America first, and anything that has to do with the globe is bad for America, which unfortunately isn't true because it's not 1950. We deal with everyone all the time, constantly. So you have to sort of look at a global scale. But he might, in 4 years, if he runs again and people say, you know what, I like that he pulled out of the Paris Accord, he might be reelected based on that.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of local governors and mayors and state and city level politicians have come out and said that they are going to stick with the ideals of the Paris Accords. And Nike, Facebook, all these different companies have come out and said we're going to still move towards energy independence and green energy and all these sorts of things. Zuckerberg actually put out a statement saying that Facebook wants to get to 100% renewable energy regardless of this. So how much of a difference could those companies and those local governments and statewide governments make in maybe basically resisting this idea of pulling back on these agreements?
Well, California, especially, for years, decades really, California has been the strictest emissions area in the world. If you wanted to sell a car in California, which we love cars, I love cars, you had to adhere to our very strict carbon emissions. California continuing down that road means that if you are GM, if you're Toyota, if you're Ford, you have to make a car that adheres to California's strict emissions. So that does help a little bit. And then you have to look at the global scale. GM is not going to switch gears on its, this Bolt EV, and Toyota is not going to switch gears on their EV roadmap. I mean, these roadmaps are built out 5, 10, 15 years into the future. They're not going to switch gears because we decided as a country, and this really is as a country decided to pull out of this. It's important for the cities and the states to sort of stay the course environmentally, and because it forces these companies to continue to stay the course because they want to sell their products, they want to sell their services in these states, in these cities, and so it does help. It would, but if we had the whole country behind it, it would be better.
Yeah, and I was going to lead into vehicles, which I think is definitely one of the categories that's directly potentially impacted by this. They have their own efforts going on. What does this say about innovation and the progress and innovation that's being made in green when it comes to autonomous vehicles and electric vehicles and their efforts there? I mean, it sounds like from what you're saying, really it'll end up being business as usual because they've already kind of decided to go that route. Whether the United States decides to pull out or not, they're still going to kind of go that road.
Yeah, there are regulations in place. Automakers have to make a certain amount of vehicles that are EV or they're hybrid, and Trump might pull those out. But the customers are starting to look at these. They're starting to sort of to glom onto these. I mean, San Francisco, there's a ton of Teslas, there's a ton of Bolt EVs, but it's San Francisco. I mean, it's a bit of a bubble. But the rest of the nation can look at a car and say, you know what? I can just charge this car in my garage at night, get up in the morning, drive to work, do anything else I want during the day, not have to stop by, the gas station. Just come home, charge it again in my garage. I'm going to save money. I'll never have to worry about changing oil again. I mean, there's a lot of sort of practical byproducts that come from EV use, and the automakers see this, and we're probably going to be seeing more EV SUVs because the SUV market is still growing. Everything else is a little flat, but like I said, these are huge roadmaps. Every automaker wants to be innovative now. They all want to be tech companies. They all want to be the next Apple for your car. So they're not going to reverse course because of, one decision made by the U.S. government.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's at least a glimmer of hope, I'd say. If all these companies have already kind of decided, and many of the major ones, Facebook, Google, they already have, have committed themselves to being 100% renewable energy, all this type of stuff. It's not like a decision like this suddenly makes them change their minds and be like, yeah, actually, let's just start throwing energy all around.
Yeah.
So I guess that's a good thing, right?
Let's just have coal burn. Let's just have a tire fire to run all of Facebook's
no big deal.
Servers. I mean, these huge companies, it looks good. I mean, it's a great PR if you are a green company, and that plays well everywhere in the United States. That plays well internationally. So even if it's a PR, or if it's a tax break or whatever, it's still every little bit counts as we're watching, the ice shelf sort of fall apart and glaciers just, recede. And, we have to figure out something, because eventually the real losers in all this are humans.
Yeah.
That's everyone's like, well, we're worried about a spotted owl or we're worried about an ocelot. I'm like, no, at the end of the day, 150 years, may not be humans, because we messed everything up. And we could talk about going to Mars or whatever, but really we should fix where we live now, because after we're gone, if we totally hose the entire planet, after we're gone, nature will just bulldoze over us and start over.
Yeah.
Well, nature, just like the very the genius Jeff Goldblum. Nature finds a way.
Well, I think NASA's also figured out a way. They're sending things into the sun, so that's not a bad idea. You can just go towards the sun.
Send everything into the sun.
Whatever, we're done.
Throw your tires there.
Roberto Baldwin with Engadget.com. Always great to get you on, Roberto. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you again soon.
All right, well, we've got a voicemail from someone who thought on how mass transit and autonomous might actually get along in the future, how this might all work together. Let's listen to that.
Hi, guys. Hey, I was just in Seattle this last weekend for the Memorial Day, and took the last trip over the I-90 express lane. They're closing it to put in a new light rail thing. It just occurred to me, with all this self-driving cars that are happening, is that going to really fundamentally change the mass transit? And is this one of these cases where the public transportation system is out of sync with what's happening? Are they going to close the express lane and put in mass transit, the light rail system, just to find out that it's totally outdated with all the self-driving cars and self-driving transportation that's happening? Has anybody been talking about this? Have you heard anything about this, or what do you guys think? Thanks.
It's a good question.
It's a fantastic question.
It seems to fly. It seems like a solution to a now problem.
Yeah.
Maybe not a solution to a future problem. Although there will always kind of be a reason to go super fast from point A to point B.
Yeah. Right? If you have a mass group of people who want to get from San Francisco to Los Angeles, or New York to Miami, or across the country, or even in between countries, then moving them in bulk makes sense, right? Yeah, whether that's a train or a hyperloop or a plane or whatever it is,
or a teleportation pad, maybe
right?
someday,
right? So that could make sense. Now, I think some of the appeal of self-driving cars, and eventually maybe us not owning cars and all that kind of thing, is that a car would show up when we need to get to some specific place more locally, and then we just use cars on a kind of as-needed basis. So it's like you're the only one who's going to be going to your home after this show is done and we leave the studio, right?
As far as I know.
Exactly. So that would make sense for you in that sort of situation.
Yeah.
And then all that time where your car today currently is stuck in the parking lot, not doing anything, not being useful, that's the time in which autonomous vehicles can make vehicles useful, right? Yeah. So we're most of our time, our cars are sitting in parking lots and garages, and they're taking up space. So you know, it's a great question, and I don't think local governments are talking enough about this, in part because, you know, self-driving cars aren't really a thing yet for the masses. They're not accessible. They're not attainable. They're not even really something that, in many cases, governments can test out themselves. It's just a handful of tech companies who aren't even quite getting it totally right yet. But things like parking lots, I could see those going away a lot more than you know, light rail systems inside of a city.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's exactly it. There will always be a reason to move large amounts of people quickly from point A to point B.
Yep.
You know, maybe that's a system that'll be innovated on after they figure out this whole autonomous vehicle thing. But
or we can all just get jetpacks, and then if everybody has to commute from one city to another in the morning, you're just going to see like a flock of birds. But it's us with jetpacks.
People flying in a V formation.
You know, the flying V. Yeah, you know, I mean, who knows? Who knows where it's all going to go? But it's
I hope
fun
that
stuff.
happens. That would be awesome.
It's fun stuff to think about, though, right? It's just fun to imagine.
It's the future. It's always fun to think about the future. Well, mostly. It could also be very depressing.
Yeah.
TNT's fan of the day is Brian Dort, who sent us this photo on Twitter saying he was, quote, catching up on tech news today in the command center while working and monitoring his 3D printer. That's quite a command center, I got to say.
He's not playing around.
That's a nice center with us up in the corner of the room. Love it. Show us how you watch or listen to TNT. Just record a video or take a picture of yourself or your setup. You can post it on Instagram, Google+, Twitter, Facebook, Skype, in a story for some reason. You can use the hashtag HowIWatchTNT and we'll find it.
Well, Nintendo hardware is famously durable. Original Nintendo Entertainment Systems from 1983 are still running, unlike most computers and electronics from that era. But the new Nintendo Switch might be the most durable of them all. A group on YouTube called Unlock River dropped a Switch from 1,000 feet in the air. It was lifted up by a drone, and of course, they filmed the whole thing.
Oh, yeah, you can audio up on this.
Yeah. The drop did result in the breaking of the Switch's removable left Joy-Con controller. Look at that. That's at least they found an empty parking lot to do this, right?
Where is it? Where is it? Oh, there it is.
Yeah. Oof, so as you can see there, it bounced. Definitely some stuff broke off. When they were running towards it, it looked like this thing was probably fried, probably kaput. But
you have to imagine that it would be.
Right? So the left Joy-Con, the blue one, popped off. It was totally destroyed. The right Joy-Con, the red one, stood on, and then amazingly enough, the Switch actually powered on, and they were able to still play games on there and do everything they needed to do. Yeah, pretty fascinating, right?
That's insane.
Yeah, so they're pulling off the tape from the rope that was around it to attach it to the drone, in case you're wondering what that is. But yeah, it's a fully functioning Switch. Now, there were some scratches on the screen, which would get a little bit annoying, but it's technically something you could still play games on.
That's insanity.
Right?
From that far up, that long of a drop,
1,000 feet.
And just a controller.
Now,
that's the only thing.
As a Switch owner, I'm glad to know that it can survive that, but I don't want to be the one to test that with my Switch. I don't want to drop my Switch off my coffee table.
Thankfully, I don't think you're going to be up in the sky that high with the Switch going, oops.
Not happening.
Dang, how did that happen? Whoops.
No, not a chance.
But it's an impressive feat nonetheless. I mean, it looked like it just landed squarely on that controller, and that's what happened. I have to imagine, just a guess, but if it landed face first, that screen would be toast.
You would think if it landed directly on a display, that's what you would think.
But I mean, when you really actually think about the design, it actually makes a lot of sense that you have these two removable components, one on each side, that act as kind of like shock absorbers on a drop
It's a good
like
point, because if you look at our phones, they're almost all screen these days. Oh, nice, Jeff Goldblum. They're almost all screen. And if you know, whether you're hitting on the face of your phone, you're hitting on the back of it, you're hitting at the corner,
you'd think it buckled just enough.
Yeah, the display still breaks, right? Because there's nothing else around it. Right. But on the Switch, like you said, it has those Joy-Cons, which probably helped it out here.
And I'm sure, and what this really shows is that for a portable device, what is more likely than dropping out of a plane to happen is you're walking with it, or you're sitting there with it and it slips out of your hand and falls to the ground. This is a good example of how the Switch might actually be pretty darn good if it drops out of your hand to not be completely rendered useless as a result of it.
Not half bad. I'm pretty impressed. Props to Nintendo for that. We got a little Burke chat here. It says, need to drop 3 to do the proper science.
Yeah, who cares about science though, Burke?
I think you're right, but it's so hard to find a Switch. Like, you can't find them in like a Target or a Best Buy. Like, there's, I don't know how.
Yeah, so let's see you drop 3 switches, Burke. Why don't
there's
you
like there's a Switch shortage that they're competing against here.
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Science will
Maybe
find a
Nintendo
way.
will donate 3 Switches to the Twit studio, and then we'll totally drop them all. Yeah, we totally will.
I'm sure.
missing.
Yeah, not going to happen.
TNT records live every Monday through Friday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, 2300 UTC at twit.tv/live. You can always be part of the show by emailing us at tnt@twit.tv or leave us a voicemail like we had today, 260-TNT-SHOW. And you can find us on Twitter. We are at Tech News Today TV.
Share your thoughts on the stories we discuss in the TNT subreddit at technewstoday.reddit.com. You can find all the ways to subscribe to our show and others here at Twit at twit.tv/TNT. And if you want to tweet me, I'm at NateOG.
And I'm at Jason Howell on Twitter. Thanks to our technical director, Brian Burnett. Thanks to Burke for helping out in the studio and occasional Burke chat. Thanks to Kevin for editing this show. And thanks to you for talking tech with us today. We'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye, everybody.